Good morning and welcome back to Pretty Gets Gritty. So today I'm going to be using some explosion powders and we're going to be doing some different techniques. So don't be afraid to say hi and let me know that you're watching in the comments, and I can try and answer any questions that you have along the way. So you've probably seen me use these on stream before, but I thought I would show you how I go about working with different ways and things. So let's move these back just a little so you can see a bit better. I'm going to be creating on some index cards, so these are tabbed ones, so that we can start to build an actual little journal. Hi Elaine and hi Jane. And I've started by creating a couple of watercolours with our explosion powders. So if you have some little pots, you want them to be watertight so that you're not having them leak everywhere. Create a little label for each one and then you can refill as needed. So I have added some milestone, but I need to top up my Artemis. Now Artemis, you can see, well and truly well used, but don't actually rinse out your pot at this point because there's still useful pigment in there. So I'm going to add a bit more. So you just want to gently tap so you get a good amount of powder. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to add a little bit of water. Now we don't want to add too much. And there we go. And all that we're going to do is just tighten the lid and give it a shake. So when you actually come to use these, you're going to want to shake them first and then give them a little stir with your paintbrush as you apply them, because the mica will settle. Give a good little shake. You want to shake so that you can actually see the colour you paint through the bottom of your container. So it's a good idea to use a clear container for this. So looking quite good. A lot of that gold's mixing in. Okay. I also thought I would create a bit of a mix. Hi Mum! So in another pot I'm going to take, let's start with some Attis, which is a nice green colour. I'm going to tap out a good amount. But to that I'm also going to add some pretty powder. Now some of these may still be available on the website. That's so that I can have a bit of a different colour, and this is going to be even more sparkly. So I'm going to use a little bit of a trouble and pop that in there. Make sure you get your screw lid back on. A little bit more water. And there we go. So we should see some interesting colour combos in this one. Looks very dark today, doesn't it? Might see if I can put the light on and see if that helps. It's not actually that dark in here, it's just a bit of a weird one. So if you compare it to our normal Attis, give that one a shake too, so you can see we've got a bit more of a bluey tone going on, which is cool. So good idea to have a mix, especially if you're going to be doing lots of foliage work. And hi Sam, I'm just going to pop that light on so it's a bit brighter in here. Doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but it's just enough. Okay, we can also add it to spray bottles. So I'm going to grab the spray that I've just used to add some water, and we can add some to this. Now bear in mind, because the amount of water in here, although it's very little for the spray bottle, it's going to be quite washed out in terms of the actual powder. Now, these do come with a little funnel. If you want to use the funnel, you can do, but to be honest, I think I'm just going to get my nozzle in there and give it a good tap. There we go. Oh. If any goes on your desk, don't throw it, don't try and sweep it away. We can use that in a bit. What was that you said, Sam? I want the logo on my lives. I can probably help you out there, Sam. It's because I use Streamlabs to go live rather than the Facebook app, so I can do things that go over the top. But there's an online version you can use now that is just as cool. So give it a good shake. And whenever you're using anything that has micro in it, always make sure that you do shake that bottle before you actually squeeze the trigger, because it does tend to settle and we don't want to clog our nozzles. And while we're here, just so that we've got a few different ones done, let's go for Mars. And yeah, the bottles are great, so it's actually a pack of 6. Available from a well-known river. And they come with 2 little funnels and a sheet of labels so that you can label each one. And I'm doing these in the same order as what these are on the desk, just so I can go back and label them after. And hi Louise and hi Angie. Okay, so last one, Artemis. What I love about this is you can see all the coloured pigment drop through the water. It's quite a lovely effect. It's a shame you can't spray it like that. So they do all mix in, so you get kind of a mix of the colours rather than having lots of different colours, which is something to bear in mind. If you want to keep the variation in the colour, then you're going to want to spray just plain water and then explosion powder over the top as usual. I thought it'd be good to have those as a kind of a standby. As I said, with the bits that you've left on your mat, don't worry about it. We can come back with a damp paintbrush and pick those up after. Or it might be that we end up mixing some medias into those. So, with that said, I'm going to, first of all, let's go for a bit of white gesso. Presuming I can open it. There we go. So you want a reasonably old brush. So typically my brushes tend to go through a bit of a life cycle, so they start off at the softer end of the paint, so in terms of things like watercolour and gouache, and that go through to acrylics and your oil paints, and then finally they get it to gesso before eventually going either into a mixed media piece or unfortunately eventually go into the scrap heap. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of gesso and I'm just going to pull through that bit of powder that's on the desk, and you're going to see that you get like a marbling effect across the brush. So let's just see if I can get that to focus. It's glaring a little bit, and we're going to brush it on without mixing it, so we can get the most out of that pigment so that we're getting our brush strokes. And at this point I'm not that concerned about getting perfect coverage of gesso. So this way, when we start to do things like our spraying, it's going to pick up differently on the craft card to where we've got our gesso. Same when we start to bring in texture paste and hydro. So a little bit more onto our brush. Again, sweep it through the powder so that we're still picking up some of that pigment. You're going to see that you get really dark streaks. Let me move that camera because I'm kind of going off. There we go. That's better. So now you can see that we've got this dark streak, but then we've got some lighter streaks as well. Let's go here. See, I'm probably moving the camera closer as it's more likely to get clumped with the paintbrush. I'm just going to make use of that wet gesso to just pull some of that colour through. A little bit more out of our pot. So I'm literally just dipping in the very tip of my brush so that I'm not loading up our brush too much with gesso. Okay. So with that done, I'm going to pop that to one side while that dries. And let's swap. So I'm not going to clean my brush at this point, so it's still going to have a bit of white gesso in it. So we're going to be working in the same place on a mat, but I'm going to swap to, let's go to the transparent gesso for this next one. So you're going to kind of have half and half. Now with my transparent gesso and with my gel medium, I do put a little bit of press and seal just around the top, just so that when it comes to actually opening the lid, it's quite easy to open. However, this one seems to have welded itself to the side. That's okay, we can get it off. One of those talk amongst yourselves. There we go. So, just want to get a little bit of that onto my brush. And let's go into the same place on my palette. So I'm actually using a palette paper pad from the works. And it's a good way of protecting your desk, but also being able to mix stuff without having to go to the expense of a plastic palette or having to wash it out afterwards. And there's lots of different techniques that we can use this for too. So again, a little bit of powder on top. I'm just going to pull that through. And down our page we go. So you might find that you get occasional bit of Artemis that's going to pop through, which is the greeny colour. But that's okay, because they make quite a nice combination, the purple and the green. So it's one that I use quite often in my work. So this is mostly transparent gesso with a little bit of the white that was left over. So as this dries, you're going to see some bits are going to lighten up and go transparent, which then means that our pigment will darken. So it's a bit of a hard way to kind of judge which way the colours are going to go. So now we have not much left on there at all. So if I just do that, so literally the only white that's left is now in the brush. And let's swap to Mars. Actually, let's go to a pigment powder. So I'm going to go to Aquamarine. And again, just pop a little bit up onto our sheet. I'm just going to dot it around a little bit so it's not just all in one big clump. Otherwise, when we take our brush through it, it's just going to clump on the brush, and that isn't what we want. So just spread it out just a little. Okay. And hi Archangel, sorry I missed you there. And hi Susan if I hadn't said hi already. So back into our transparent gesso, and this time we're going to make it more of a consistent colour so we can actually give it a good mix. So rather than going streaky this time, we're going to actually paint with it. So again, just wanting to go quite loosely because we're going to build up these layers as we go anyway. So our gesso is like our base layer. And if you wanted to, if you were finding that you were getting a lot of cockling with your index card, then you could always prime with an initial layer of gesso first. It's just as easy a craft. I quite wanted to bring some of that through into the finished piece. Okay, so that's another one done. Now, if you wanted to, you could put a bit of black gesso on the next one, and then we can use the pigment over the top, so you just get the mica shimmer then. But I think I'm going to go for some gel medium next, so that we can play with a bit of resist as well. So the gel medium is thinner than the transparent gesso to a certain extent, in some ways. And let's go back to Mars, just because I love rose gold. So again, this time, rather than going for the streaky look, we're going to go a bit more solid. A little bit more. Might need to just pop a little bit more transparent gesso or gel medium into that actually. It's a little bit. There we go. A little bit more on the Mars as well. Hi Sarah. There we go. So where we're seeing the white, remember that's going to mostly go back clear. So we can actually kind of shade with our metallic pigment as well. And I think we're pretty much there for that one too. So we've done two Mars, we've done a blue, let's go for a coral. And this time I think I'm just going to add a touch of water to it. So far we've done white gesso, transparent gesso, gel medium. And then we're going to do just water. Now obviously there's still a little bit of that, of those gessos in the brush, which is what I'm going to rely on to be a bit of a binder as well. Now it's going to look like it clumps a little bit, so just be patient with it and just keep stabbing at the clumps. It's a good one to do if you need to vent some frustration, just stab at it and you're going to get this gorgeous colour. So if you compare that to what's in the actual tub, yeah, it comes out a little bit darker, and we can brush that on. If you get some bits that are a bit more powdery than others, just dip back into the water, go back into your mix and then brush over the top, and that should just soften it out a bit so it's not quite so clumpy. Is that even a word? Clumpy. Okay, and that's a little bit. So now, before we do anything else, we're going to clean our brush. So, this is where my lovely clean water now turns to a lovely shade of white. Let's give that a bit of a clean. You want to make sure that you get all the white bits out of your brush. So if you can still see a bit of a tide line here, you just kind of need to get that out. So a little bit more water. I'm just going to give it a squiggle. Brush cleaner is also good, so that we don't end up losing our brushes too early. So you can get that in a soap bar form, or you can get it in a squeezy bottle. Okay, and with that done, let's go for our first piece. That should be pretty dry now, and we can start to work onto our surface. So I'm going to grab a stencil, and it is going to be easier to use one that has a bit detail. So I'm going to go for this section here. So this was using the Artemis, so get my Artemis out. And this is where we can start to play with shading with the colours. So I'm going to pop a little bit more onto our mat. And this time let's get some texture paste going. So this is the white texture paste, which is really good for stenciling. And I'm going to get a palette knife. The longer the length of your palette knife, the easier it is to stencil with as well. So I'm going to try and get a good dollop. And then we can mix it into our powder. So how much you mix it will change the colour to a certain extent, because while it's still like this, you're going to get some marbling that goes through your stenciling. If you mix it till it's lovely smooth colour, you'll probably find that those colours are going to change slightly. So give it a good scrape along the bottom of the paper as well, so don't be afraid to use some pressure. Otherwise you can tend to find that you get a bit of powder stuck underneath. It's a bit like making scrambled egg, I suppose. There we go. So just going to use that little bit there that was left on my palette knife, just to make it a little bit paler one. So if I take a bit of a dive through that and just lift it up, you can see that we get little coloured striations through. Let's see if we can get that to transfer as well, which would be cool. So I'm going to press down with my stencil and go straight over the top. And you're going to see that we start to get a mottled effect, but it's going to carry on mixing as we do that. So if you want to definitely keep all those different colours, you kind of want to undermix it. Okay, so straight away we can see that the colour changes between the two. So we don't need a lot of powders to create different colours, which is cool. So I'm going to take that there and turn that round, and let's pop the same bit of stencil over here. Now on this bit I can see we've got a little pop of the yellow as well, which is cool. Let's see if we can get that to come out. You never know. There we go. So we've got a smudge of that yellow popping through. Now if you've got something like that where you're happy with the colour, just try and avoid going back over the top. As with each stroke you're going to be mixing it up a little bit more. Just going to try and get that end bit in there. just down here, right into this corner. Without getting your fingers, preferably. Okay. So, there's our stenciling. We can see that we've got those kind of yellowy green hues in our little dots, as well as our sort of bluey greens that are going to go through our other sections. And when this dries, we should get a little bit of metallic sheen as well. So, just to save it drying out, I'm just going to put the lid back on my texture paste. And let's go to our blue one, because again, that should be nice and dry, and we can pop that on there. And we can always add a bit of blue, just to tone it in a bit. A little bit too much there, so that'll do. I do apologise for the amount of background noise today, just it's too warm to shut the windows in here today. So I'm just going to give that a mix. So this is going to actually firm up our texture paste quite a bit, so that's okay. Can start to almost model with it so it can get that thick and gooey. Okay, so let's get this bit here. I want to go for this flower in the middle. And again, go up to this corner, and we can do a bit of a bigger section. There we go. So we're still going to pick up a little bit of that Artemis as well. There's going to be bits that have gone through onto my paper, but that's fine. That's what it's there for, rather than my desk. There we go. So typically what I do in terms of texture paste is I'll start with the thinner one first, and then we can build up and get it thicker and thicker so that we can build up our layers. So our white texture paste is like the nice stenciling one, so it picks up lots of details. Try and not put it back in the wet would be good. Now, on this one, let's start to go a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to give my palette knife a quick clean. And this was the coral colour, so let's go for that one. And this time I'm going to go up to the thick texture paste, which I haven't got down. There we go. Got everything else, we've got that one. So you're going to have to get some more of this one. Okay, so this one is really thick. So bear in mind that when we're adding pigments to it, we're going to make it thicker still. So if you want to kind of loosen it up, you can do. And it's going to feel kind of, how would I describe that? What does it remind me of? It's a bit like, butter that's been in the fridge too long. So at the moment, if we were to try and spread that, it's not going to work. So we are going to need to loosen it up very slightly, either by using some gel medium, which I think is probably the way I'm going to go, and a little bit of water. We'll see how it goes. So just going to reseal that so it doesn't dry out. In actual fact, let's do it a little spritz of water. So we've just got plain water in my spray bottle, and on we go. That's better. So just want to make sure that we're getting all that pigment up off our palette paper too. So good scrape. That's almost back to the consistency it should be. And let's change stencil. So I'm going to go for something that's got a bit of a wider area to it. There we go. So it's not always about using the whole of the stencil. You might want to use just a point and create a border. It might be that you want to just highlight particular elements. So you might pop that just there and go again. So we can actually start to extend our stencil, make it look like it's a much bigger design. Just by changing the angle. Okay. And up in this top section, let's go for just that section in the stencil here. So I'm going to highlight kind of round this circle. And there we go. Set that on up too. Let's pop that in there. Now I'm going to work on to that was the transparent or gel medium one. So you can see we've got a bit more shine than what you'd expect with just the transparent gesso. High hazel. And I'm going to use up what we've got left, just because we don't want to be wasteful. Now as you get further down, you're probably going to find that you get a bit marbling going on. That's fine, because we're going to end up spraying over the top of some of these anyway. So by mixing in our pigments, what we're actually doing is saving time later on, so that we're not having to necessarily use much time to colour. And sometimes if you want to be quick, colouring your mediums is the way to go. Okay, so we're nearly there. I'm running out of space to dry things, so some would say that's pretty normal. Boys running out of room. So this nice colour that we've got this too is going to work quite well with our Artemis as well. So this is nice purpley tones. So you can see where it's going to pick up little bits of pigment now that are getting right down to the bottom. Let's go turn that round, and we're going to finish off of this top end here. So typically what I try and do is like a diagonal. So with your stencils, you want to try and make sure that you pop those straight into the water as well, if you can. Okay, so let's let that one dry. And at this point, if you want to change your paper, you can do. So I'm just going to take that one out of the way so that we're not colouring everything else with it. And that's the benefit of using a palette pad. So let's get another sheet. And you can use it still in the pad if you want to. I'm just putting a couple of pieces out on the desk so that it's a little bit easier for you to see. So now that we've done that, we can start to play with things like our watercolours. Now that one's still wet, so let's go for one that's dry. There we go. And I'm going to take some stamps. Let's take a fairly loose bird image, I think. Means it looks like a sky anyway. There's some nice blues. So if you have the new parrot image, you could use that one. You can use either of the two birdies. I'm going to use a stamp platform for this one. Now, when you're stamping onto a textured surface, just bear in mind that you're probably not going to get a perfect impression because you are going over something that has lumps and bumps in. So, kind of decide which bits that you really need to have clear and put those on the flat bits. So, I think I definitely want to have the face clear, whereas the tail and the wings don't matter so much. So I'm going to put the face where we've got none of that texture paste. Okay. Make sure you change your platform round if you have one that does clear round rubber stamps. And we can lift that up. And in terms of ink pads, go for one that is going to be able to give you a nice strong image without bleeding if you start with watercolour over the top. What shall I go for? Let's go with the craft, and I'm going to go for, let's go black actually, change it around. Thought I was grabbing my brown one, but I'll get black instead. Now, because we're going to be working onto something that's still a little bit damp, I'm going to make sure I do a good coverage of ink. And that ink then acts as a buffer between whatever it is you put on your surface and the stamp, so it should be a little bit easier to clean. Okay, and we go. Give it a good press. And if you have one, use a little. We really need to decide on a name for these things, but it's a little tool to help you press down without having to look like you're doing CPR on your stamp. There we go. So I'm going to use a clean bit of my cloth, so that's important. Don't get your gel medium bits on it. And just a spritz of water. I'm just going to clean my stamp up. There we go. and pop that back on your kit. So now we can use our sprays and our watercolours to actually colour our image. So let's start off with a bit of Artemis. I'm just going to give it a shake. So remember how I said always make sure that you shake before you spray. I'm just going to give it a tiny little squirt. Didn't wait quite long enough in the ink, but that's fine. We can work with it. And let's go to our mixed Artemis and the green baking powder, which was the jade. That's the word I'm looking for. Don't drop it. Oh dear, Natty. Natty no. So, let's just get those bits. It's mixed media, you're going to get mucky anyway. And I'm just going to use a nylon brush and give this a good stir. Get right round those edges with your watercolours, because that's where you tend to find that most pigment kind of gets trapped in your little container. And then we can work round. So you're going to see that just how soft this colour is compared to what's in the actual tub. So, pause there. Now, I'm going to go where my shading would be. So there's always going to be a bit of a shade that's going to drop down here. So I did do a stream on colouring this particular stamp. So if you want to go back and watch that, you can do. And then we're going to have a bit of shade that again is going to make this wing pop out here. So you're going to go above that wing. It is a beautiful colour. It's one of my favourites. And we're just going to stroke along the top of that wing. And again, we're going to go underneath and down the right hand side of the body. So we're thinking the light is coming kind of this way. So you want to think where your shadow is going to be. There we go. And we can still pop a little bit just underneath this outer edge of the wing here. And we can do just some little dots down the end. And that's going to kind of feed into this kind of inky look. So try not to let your bristles look too kind of straight line when you're doing this. It is more of a stab, so that you're getting kind of more of a pouncy look than a streaky look. And it's going to be bigger closer towards the body, like so. And then as you get away, it's going to go a little bit lighter. So we get the feeling that it's kind of in movement and flying. I'm going to do a little bit just down from this edge too. So we kind of feel like he's flapping rather than just magically going along. I'm just going to pop a little bit down his belly too, so that we get the feel that he's more of a 3D rounded object. And just down that bottom section there. So far so good, quite like that. Now hopefully I can end up not wearing the next one. So, Artemis. So this is just pure Artemis now, rather than having the mix. So this is where you're going to see the difference in the shades between the two. So again, we're going to mix, and we're going to see more of that golden shade come through this time. And it may not necessarily look that much different when it's on your paper, but when it dries and you manage to rotate it around in the light, then you're going to see the difference. And I'm just going to dot that in, following our kind of sketch lines. Let's put a little bit on his beak. A little bit more where our shadows are going to fall, so we're kind of deepening that colour, especially just under this wing and down the tail. And if you want to, you can add a bit more pouncing just with that, just up here. Okay, so I'm going to move my magnet slightly because I want to get around this edge. And I'm going to use the watercolour again, give it another stir, because each time that we're leaving it, that mica is going to settle back down. I'm just going to paint along as if we're just going to cover the whole thing, but we're not just yet. Now I'm going to add a dip of water and we can start to blend that in. So we're going to find that bits of our resist are actually going to start popping through. A bit more water. So with each dip of the brush, you're kind of going to be watering down what's in your brush, but you're also going to be blending what's already on your card a bit better. Don't forget to do the middle. It can be tempting to kind of just go around the edges where it's nice and easy, but we also need to go through, do this centre section too. And there is still a little bit of pigment in that brush, so when you go over things like your texture paste, you're going to find that it's still going to draw out a little bit of pigment, so it's going to make things a little darker. So if there's bits that you want to keep, like the yellow in those dots, then just go around it. And you wouldn't think that all those different colours are pretty much one powder. Two if you count the ones that I mixed into the watercolour, which is cool. There we go. And that blue is going to slowly pop back through. Now when that's dry, you can doodle back into it, and I'll show you that in a bit. So how are we doing? 10 minutes to go. Do we think that can dry in time for me to doodle? You never know. So let's pop that to one side while that's drying. And let's go for the last one that we did. There was these soft purples from the Artemis and the pink from the coral. And I'm going to swap stamp sets and go for something super pretty. So I'm going to go for the butterflies. I do love butterfly. So let's go for a big one. I'm going to give my brush a quick rinse. So never leave your brushes in the water, because it's not good for them. And because it's just watercolour, it's nice and easy to wash that out. Believe it or not, this brush used to be white. And let's change the ink pad this time, and I'm going to go for, let's go for a colour and be bright and bold. To bring out that purple, I'm going to go for Villainous Potion. So the archival inks are oil based, so be pretty resistant to most things. move my stamp, and let's get down there. Now go careful when you're placing that, because obviously it's still got ink on it to a certain extent, although the archives you'll find dry on your stamp pretty quickly. So you can see here where I was saying about the texture paste. Now let's just put the lid back on this so I can get a bit of oomph behind my stamp. There we go. Okay. So now let's scrub our purple spray. Now this is definitely one way you want to make sure that anything that could get splattered, that you don't want splattered, is moved. So. So some bits I'm allowing it to pull, other bits not so much. And anything that's just gone on your plate, I'm just going to just dry that up. I saw a really cool technique the other day actually, where you can use your cleaning up cloth in terms of like kitchen towel, things like that, and actually turn that into material to work with. So that's quite cool idea that I think I will probably be doing it in technique class at some point. So this is going to be kind of a weekly feature, so it can build up on technique book. Okay, so usually what I do at this point is blast it with heat, but I don't really want to do that with this one. I want to try and let it dry naturally so that we get as much colour out of our pigment as possible. Go into Artemis, so again give it a good stir, get around those edges. You should see it change from being like a clear purple to having that metallic shimmer on top if you've done your job properly. And we can actually go and paint that in to any bits that we kind of missed that we want to pull out. So I can take that into these little sections in here if I want to. And go a bit more blobby down to this corner, technical term. Now, where we're going direct onto the craft card, it's going to look awfully dark. But to a certain extent that is just because it's wet. So don't get misled into thinking, oh, it's going to be really, really dark when it's dry. You're going to find it lightens up quite considerably. Just going to let that mix again. And I'm just going to drop a little bit just into the body, so we get a bit more colour in there. Same down here. Okay, and I'm going to go around these inside bits of the wing. Now if you've created your coral and watercolour, you could drop that in the same way. So that you get both kind of popping through. And do the same here. And I think then what I'm going to do is just leave it there for today until next week. So we're giving this like time to dry and well and truly, so the colours come through. Because if I try and do too much into these when it's too wet, we're going to lose some of that work, which we don't want. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll be having a go. Let's just pop a bit more up there while I'm thinking about it. A bit more water. And I will pop a photograph up with all of these once they're dry, so that you can see how they come out ahead of next week. And I look forward to seeing what you're going to use for your technique journal. So take care, and I will see you next week, probably at the same time. So have fun, and goodbye.